Hello, I'm Alan Austin from Calibre, and I'm here today with Juliet Manning and Mark Wooster. Juliet is a senior financial advisor and she advises wealth management clients on a national basis. Mark is the Chief Investment Officer for Calibre Investment. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about ESG investing. What does that mean? Environmental, social and governance, and why that's become so important for so many people. So not just clients, but also client advisors, fund managers and the companies that they invest in, governments, regulators, the general public, and so on. So Juliet, from your perspective as a financial advisor and from that of your clients, why is it that ESG has become so important?
So as financial advisors, our primary role is to help clients achieve their goals, both now and well into the future. And these goals can be both well-being and financially based. Investing is an integral part of making that happen. So it's really important that we're able to align our investments with our values. And there's growing awareness these days that investing impacts on both at a society level and the environment. So we really need to know that what we're doing is, if we want to make a positive difference and make the world a better place, that our investments are going to reflect that.
So Juliet, it's always useful, I think, to relate these things to a big picture approach. And when you have a client who has quite a significant capital sum and you're investing that for them and putting together solutions that are going to last for the next 30 to 40 years, you need to ensure that you've got alignment with all of their criteria and their values and their objectives as an investor. How do you then think about ESG and what are the criteria that you're looking for when you're selecting an ESG type solution?
Well, there's a lot of greenwashing out there at the moment. And what I mean by greenwashing is looking good rather than doing good. So it makes it really hard for people to sift through all that stuff and know whether an investment is truly ESG, taking an ESG approach, or whether they're just paying lip service. So it's important to look for an integrated, disciplined approach to ESG that's actively managed. And so you need to be able to look below the surface and see whether a company or a fund manager is actually doing what they say they're doing, and if they're not, hold them accountable.
Thanks, Juliet. That's really interesting to hear. Let's bring Mark into the conversation and have you chat to him about some of the aspects of ESG investing.
So Mark, when people start doing research on ESG, it can be really overwhelming to know where to start. So what do you suggest? What sort of criteria should people look for?
Well, I think it is really difficult because there is just so much information, and as you said, there is a degree of greenwashing going on, which is pretty unfortunate, but it's out there. So I think what investors have really got to look for is that properly aligned and comprehensive process. It's really the only thing they can really hang their hat on, because trying to just take ratings or anything else does tend to lead them down some pretty superficial paths, and it doesn't give them the result they're really looking for. And I think that's where working with people like yourself, there's a real advantage that clients have there, because as you say, they're wanting to align their investments and this whole wealth management process with their values, and that's perfectly natural. And so what we're trying to do is actually make sure that the portfolio construction process is really well aligned with clients' objectives broadly. And so the nice thing about that is that we can embed the ESG or the sustainable investing approach into the core of the portfolio construction. And that means that not only do the clients achieve their objectives in terms of wanting to align their values, but they can increase the probability of achieving their objectives by getting proper alignment with the investment solution. So when we're looking at underlying managers, for example, a core part of Calibre's process is actually addressing the ESG issues. And what we're looking for is managers where they're addressing ESG as a core part of their process. And the best managers we find actually use the process of looking at ESG and sustainability as a core part of their risk management. For example, our international equity manager uses ESG to actually inform it about pricing and intrinsic value. So that's what we like to see, where the process is actually embedded as a core part of their process. So for me and for Calibre, it means that that's a much more compelling process as well, rather than relying on an altruistic approach. It means it's compelling because it actually adds to their performance as an investment or a fund manager.
So does taking this ESG approach impact on them being able to achieve their goals?
Well, I think as we mentioned there, it actually enhances their ability to achieve their goals. So you get that nice alignment with their values, but managers and Calibre as well, Calibre Investment, using ESG as a focus within the core process means it actually enhances the performance of those individual managers and the total portfolio. So I think there has been this perception out there that this approach can compromise people's ability to get proper performance, or they somehow have to make some compromises themselves in terms of their lifestyle to achieve that or get proper alignment. That's not true anymore. And in fact, when you're looking at managers and underlying investments where ESG is a core component, it actually enhances the whole process. So I think it's a really good alignment.
So tell me about ESG and sustainability. Are they interchangeable, or are they different things?
I suppose it's useful to go back a little bit and look at the more recent history of the space. We started out with socially responsible investing, and people sort of called it green investing, and that's where the greenwashing term comes from. And so what has evolved, I think it has expanded quite nicely. So it's really evolved and developed from the socially responsible, from the green investing, which was a bit narrow. It was just a few exclusions like tobacco and arms and so on, to a much broader and more comprehensive focus. And so yes, ESG and sustainable investing have become interchangeable. And so I think through climate change, a lot of people are focused on the environment, but it is important to bring in the social and governance into that. And I think our clients are finding that they're quite comfortable with that approach, because you do get that alignment with your values in terms of wanting to invest in a way that actually enhances and means you're a better community effectively.
So how do you put this into practice as an investment manager? What sort of processes do you have in place?
Well, it's a core part of our research and analysis and portfolio construction and monitoring and review. So when we first start putting the portfolios together, we're looking, as we said, for that proper alignment with the client's objectives, and what we're aiming to maximise the probability of clients achieving those objectives. So we're not looking to go out and try and shoot the lights out in terms of return, because it's a bit counterintuitive, but when clients and investors follow that approach, they actually end up with poorer outcomes. So what we've got to focus on, and what investors should really focus on, is making sure they've got the right underlying exposures to achieve their objectives. And that's where we do build those portfolios from the ground up, with from the objectives that people like yourself determine with working with the clients. And so we start that process of looking at what are the effective exposures that we need, and then we look at in what way can we implement or get those exposures in the best possible way. And that's where we're trying to avoid concentrations of risk, again, because that diminishes the probability of the clients achieving their objectives. We're in an environment now where we've seen some investors out there, unfortunately, get sort of dragged into concentrations of risks that aren't aligned at all well with their longer term objectives. So then that's when we start looking at underlying managers or different direct solutions as well. and that's when the ESG criteria starts to come in. But it is part of the core processes in terms of research and analysis that we go through. So, for example, when we're looking at adding a manager to the portfolios, we'll do an enormous amount of research here in the office, and then invariably we go and talk to the managers as well. And so all through that process, we are actually looking at what their ESG, how they implement ESG, how it's embedded in their processes. It's quite useful, because if we do find somebody is greenwashing or they're just sort of clipping it on the side, that's a really easy process for us to just eliminate them, and we do. We walk that talk, because the nice thing for us is that it means they're not as effective in terms of our implementation of that underlying exposure which we're after. So that's the process we follow. So when we're interviewing them as well, so for example, we go and meet managers in the US and the UK, and the last trip we went on prior to the pandemic, an extensive part of every meeting and interview is actually covering those ESG processes, and then it's quite impressive actually. In the Northern Hemisphere, they've really adopted this quite strongly, and they understand, those really good managers have a really good take. They understand very well how this adds to their processes as well. So it's quite a positive process really when you strike these good managers, and so that's the process really. It's not something we've added on either. It's a core part of the process of research analysis, and then of course once the portfolio is constructed, we're doing very proactive and active monitoring and review of every component and the portfolio as a whole. ESG is a core part of that process as well.
Thanks, Mark and Juliet, and thank you for watching. We hope that you found that interesting and informative. If you do have any questions, please feel free to go onto the website and ask those, or alternatively you can actually talk to your advisor and they'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. If you do have an interest in watching our quarterly economic and investment briefing video, that's also on the website, so please feel free to click on the link. Alternatively, ask your advisor for a link to that video and they'd be happy to send you one. Thanks.